Imagine that you're driving with a playlist on shuffle. One track explodes with energy, and the next one feels dull and lifeless, even though it's technically louder. Well, you didn't touch the volume knob, but the vibe shifted. That invisible shift is loudness, and if you're producing, mixing, or mastering, loudness is the difference between music that moves people and music that just gets skipped. Today, we're going to break loudness down in 10 minutes, and by the end, you're going to know exactly how to measure, control, and deliver loudness that works across every single platform and every playlist. And I want you to try something a little bit odd too. It's going to help you remember. Think of loudness kind of like coffee, where every cafe has its own cup sizes, but the caffeine inside is really what matters. Streaming platforms are kind of like the cafes. Your track is the coffee. If you brew it too strong, it tastes bitter. And if you brew it too weak, it tastes thin. The art of brewing coffee that tastes rich in any cup, that's the same image I want you to keep in mind as we go along. I want you to think about why loudness matters anyhow. It might seem obvious, but the answer is actually a little bit counterintuitive. Platforms like Spotify and Apple Music actually normalize tracks to around -14 LUFS, which I'll explain that in just a minute. Normalization means the platform adjusts your track's loudness to match others. Simply put, if your track is too loud, they're going to turn it right down, and if it's quieter, they're going to turn it up a little bit, but it definitely won't hit with the same impact. So it's kind of like ordering coffee at different cafes. One cafe calls it a large, and another one calls it a venti, but they all pour in roughly the same amount. If you bring in a giant thermos and demand that it gets filled, they're still only going to give you the standard serving, and that's what streaming platforms do with your music. Consistency builds trust. Without it, your song feels out of place in playlists, and listeners subconsciously tag it as kind of unprofessional. So this is where dynamics come into the conversation. Dynamics are absolutely the breathing of your music. They're the difference between the loudest and the quietest parts of the track. If you crush them with too much compression or limiting, then the track is going to feel totally lifeless. Now, loudness without dynamics is kind of like bitter coffee. Technically strong, but unpleasant to drink. Years ago, when I was really new at mixing and mastering, I learned this hard lesson when I slammed a track through compressors and limiters until it was super loud, because I thought that's what I needed to compete. And it was very loud, but it had totally lost its pulse. Loudness without dynamics is exhausting. And that track, I hate to say it, but it's just no fun to listen to. For decades, engineers tried to make tracks louder than the competition. We often call this the loudness wars, and most producers know this term. Streaming platforms finally flipped the script, and they discourage hyper-compressed masters, and now they reward clarity and dynamics. And I think that's great. The war ended when the platform said everyone gets the same exact loudness, so focus on the dynamics. Okay, before we go any further, here are the terms that you have to know as an engineer. First of all, what is DBFS? Well, this stands for decibels relative to full scale. DBFS measures how loud a digital signal is compared to the maximum possible level. 0 DBFS is what we call the ceiling, and anything above the ceiling tends to clip and get distorted. So picture a water hose. The strongest spray should be 0 DBFS, and if you push too hard, that hose is just going to burst. Okay, what about peak levels? Peak level is simply the highest point that a sound reaches at any instant, and it's useful for checking spikes, but it doesn't really reflect overall loudness. Think of jumping on a trampoline. The highest jump is the peak. Impressive, but it doesn't really show how much energy that you used on the trampoline over the last hour, for example. We also use the term RMS, which stands for root mean square. RMS measures the average energy of a sound over time, and it's way closer to how our ears actually perceive loudness. Now imagine a car trip. RMS is like the average speed that you drove, and not the fastest burst, but really the overall pace. So you can see how measuring peak levels and RMS works together for more of a complete picture. If you ever look at Reddit threads or social posts from mixing engineers, probably the most talked about term is LUFS. This stands for loudness units relative to full scale. LUFS is the industry standard for perceived loudness. Integrated LUFS is the average perceived loudness across the whole track. So think of the weather. Momentary LUFS would be like the temperature right now, and short-term LUFS would be like the average temperature for the afternoon. Well, integrated LUFS would be the average temperature for the entire day. There are a lot of technical terms to know, So far, we covered dBFS, peak levels, RMS, and LUFS, and there's still one more term that you need to know. And don't worry, if you forget any of this, just watch again. Okay, let's talk about true peak, which measures hidden spikes above digital zero, including intersample peaks. Keeping it below -1 dBTP avoids distortion. It may seem confusing, but think of it this way. Pouring soda into a glass, for example. Even if you stop at the rim, bubbles can spill over. True peak measures those bubbles. Now we need to get into the tools of the trade. First of all, loudness meters are the compass. Tools from companies like Isotope, Waves, and FabFilter show LUFS, RMS, and true peak, and they guide mixing and mastering decisions. It's like tasting your coffee before serving it. Without measuring, you don't know if it's too bitter, too weak, or just right. Loudness meters give you that taste test for your music. During mixing, engineers check RMS and short-term LUFS to balance instruments. During mastering, on the other hand, they measure integrated LUFS to ensure compliance. Limiters cap peaks, compression shapes dynamics. Together, they sculpt loudness into something very musical. So a spectrum analyzer shows the frequency content of audio in real time. It helps identify imbalances and masking. It's like looking at the color of your coffee. Too dark equals overbrewed, too pale equals underbrewed. And the analyzer shows the hidden balance of bass, mids, and highs. And that way you know if your mix is rich and full or if it's missing something. Here are some examples. Kick drums glow around 60 Hz, and bass guitars pulse at around 100, and vocals and guitars kind of crowd the mid-range at 2 to 4 kHz. Without the analyzer, you're just guessing, and with it, you see the overlaps in the clutter and the missing sparkle. Compression and limiting are also key tools, and they sometimes work together. So let's start with compression. Compression reduces the difference between the loud and the softer sounds. It smooths vocals, adds punch to drums, and steadies the bass. By the way, shameless plug, I just made a video explaining compression in a lot of detail, and I'm going to link it in the description in case you find it helpful. Now, a limiter is like a compressor, but with an infinite ratio. And that just means that it sets a hard ceiling so no signal can exceed that threshold. Picture the cafe's cup size, for example. No matter how much coffee you try to pour, the cup only holds so much, and that's limiting. Together, compression and limiting shape dynamics and prevent distortion. Compression balances instruments, and limiting caps peaks and helps ensure compliance with streaming standards. By now you get it. Loudness isn't about being the loudest. It's actually being the most musical and the most consistent and the most dynamic. Now, if you're still here, you're serious about your craft, and I've created a free tool for you. It's a set of job aids all about loudness. I'll put a link in the description so that you can use it. Subscribe for more deep dives into music production and the business behind it. I'm Kevin, founder of Innovaniac Music. We help indie artists grow, get heard, and build real connections with fans. So until the next video, dream big and create boldly.